Yep, we got a set of the Costin V8s. So as you can see, 8 holes in the base plate. The general idea being that you can shrink the wheelbase on your Ventures if you want to. And the Venture High might be one of the only trucks where this is actually worthwhile to do and possible. So we'll get into that in a bit. First, let's get into wheelbase, because I think in order to understand why this is actually a good idea on this truck, you're gonna need to know a little more about wheelbase. So let's get into that. Wheelbase on a skateboard is determined by where these 2 bolt holes are. So we got the 2 inside bolts. In this case, this is a 14-inch wheelbase. So 14 inches from there to there, that is on the short end. I have another board which has a 14.5-inch wheelbase. Again, so from those bolt holes to those bolt holes, it's a 1/2 inch bigger. So why this matters is what wheelbase tends to do is the wider your wheelbase, the heavier it feels to kick down on your tail and lift up the front of your board. When you have the wheelbase balanced properly, you get that kind of perfect timing and perfect snap where it doesn't limit your pop and it doesn't make your tricks harder. The other thing that shrinking your wheelbase can do is it can make it easier for rotational tricks like 360 flips. So you just have to imagine this like a fulcrum on a lever. So the further out, the harder it is to lift the front of the board. The further in, the less weight it takes to lift the front of the board. And it's not just the fulcrum, it's compounding. So basically, the closer the trucks are together, the easier it is to lift, the less weight. It's again about the weight on the end of the lever. The further out it is, the heavier it is. So you've got not only the position of the lever, but also the weight, like on the end of a scale. So when you have a short wheelbase board, it can make it feel really easy to kick down and like you have a lot of control on manuals. But for some people, it can also make it feel like you just can't get any pop. And anytime you try and flick, the board's not coming up high enough. So it's sort of like you flick and you're just missing the end of the board. Now for people who struggle with a long wheelbase, what it's gonna do is it's gonna make it really hard to hit down the end of the tail, and it's gonna make you under rotate on things like 360 flips. Like for me, once I get wider than a 14.25 wheelbase, my 360 flips really kind of suck. And if I'm being honest, it's not a strong trick for me in the first place, so I need all the help I can get. So before we get into the decks I wrote it on, let's really quickly look. When you line up the back bolt holes, you can see that it's actually the same truck as the original Venture High. And the first thing I did was I tried that on the 8.25 Easy Rider with the 14-inch wheelbase in the regular Venture position. So that was nothing new to me. I already know that. But let's see what happens when I shift it to the shortened wheelbase on the 14-inch wheelbase, which is already tight. So just mathematically, we're going from a 14-inch wheelbase to a 13.5, which is like crazy small. That's a kid's wheelbase. I don't know if anyone else can see that, but like those look so crazy close together. I feel like I have an adult's board with like some sort of kid's wheelbase on it. That is so different. Oh! I can't get my board in the air. It's enough of that. So the main thing I struggled with once my wheelbase was so short is the tail just hit way too soon. I couldn't get any pop on this board. It did, however, give me manual superpowers. So when you move that fulcrum in, it gets really easy to hold the manual. So let's say I wanted to film a really hard manual trick, and having the truck inward wasn't going to affect the pop feel too much for me to do the trick. I would actually ride these trucks on the inward position to help me get a way easier manual. It's definitely a cheat code. I also kind of liked the feeling of having more room in this pocket, because when my axle's further in and I'm sitting on a pinched grind, you could feel that there's just more room to stand in the pocket. So I would say it's a little bit of an improvement there. Not enough to suffer through the way too short wheelbase though. So after trying that, I decided it was time to try the 14.5-inch wheelbase. So I would never ride regular Ventures on a 14.5-inch wheelbase. That is just crazy long to me. Ventures, in my opinion, are designed to be ridden on a long wheelbase. If you look at the position of the holes, they're really far back on the base plate. No other truck has this big of a base plate with the bolts this far back. That's why they have room in the first place to even do this. So the position of those holes on your regular Venture pushes your truck way up. So to have a wide wheelbase and a truck that's way out is exactly what makes skateboarding really difficult for me. So I only ride Ventures on a 14-inch wheelbase without exception. But when I tried these ones on the inward position, I found that it totally made skating Ventures on a wide wheelbase deck really manageable. So I would say the great thing about this is that it provides option. If I want to stick to Ventures, I'm now no longer limited to searching for that 14-inch wheelbase like I have been for so long. Now, I wouldn't say it was the holy grail. Like, I would still way rather ride something like an Indy Hollow on a 14.5-inch wheelbase, but it did make it manageable. So at this point, I was tired and I was done, and I was like, I'm not gonna try anything else, that's good enough. But the next day, I did get the itch to know what it would feel like on a 14.25 wheelbase. Now, I suspected, like, just mathematically, if it's 14.25, moving both trucks in is gonna make it 13.75. That's gonna be too tight, it's gonna give me zero pop, and I'm just not gonna like it. So here's where I was wrong. I was surprised how much I actually really liked skating the 14.25 with these trucks. In the past, I've always hated skating 14.25 wheelbases with Venture highs. It's just been a combo that does not work for me at all. Now, I have to be totally honest with you guys. I was actually a little bit angry that it worked so well. For a long time, I've really had this worked out. Basically, 14-inch wheelbase, I'm gonna ride Ventures. 14.25, I'm gonna ride Indies or maybe Thunders. 14.5, which I don't even like to skate, but I'll ride light trucks like Indy Hollows. And just to give a little more context, so Aces and Indies naturally have their axles closer into the board. So that's why I'm suggesting those ones for a longer wheelbase board. So the only con to this truck, in my opinion, is that it's just increasing the madness. Just by adding these extra holes, it's doubled the amount of boards, at least, that I can now ride Ventures on, right? If it feels too heavy, try them on the inward position. So I'll admit I had a big bias coming into this. I thought the 1/2-inch adjustment was gonna be way too much, and that it was gonna be a weird novelty truck to help you ride Ventures on a super long wheelbase, but otherwise be just way too big of an adjustment. Even a 1/4-inch adjustment in wheelbase is actually pretty big. And to increase the madness even more, you also have the option to only move one truck. Like maybe the nose feels too steep, so you move just the front truck, or the tail feels too steep and you move just the back truck. The bad news is, for people with madness, this is only going to increase it. But the good news is, for people who like options, you now have more options. But that's just my opinion, you guys. Let me know in the comments what your opinion is on this crazy new truck. It's actually not that crazy. It's a smart idea. But like I said, I'm pretty sure Ventures is one of the only ones that actually makes sense to do this on. If you tried it on an Indy, because they're already so far in, the way the bolts are positioned on an Indy, you would only make Indies further in. But because Ventures are so far out to begin with, giving them an option to move in actually makes sense. anyways, I'm now totally done. That's the Venture V8. I like the color of the bushings. I think the truck looks really good. And again, totally disappointed in how much I liked it on a 14.25 wheelbase. I didn't need another confounding factor in my truck madness, but here we are. Okay, thanks. Till the next one.